My honor today to be here with Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez of Spain to have that discussion. Prime Minister, you've been in office since 2018. If I did my math and dates right, June of 2018, which means this will be your 6th NATO summit.
Yes.
And during that time, you've not only been a witness to the transformation of the alliance, but you've also been one of the people who's been steering it and guiding it. I was wondering if you could start us off today with some thoughts on what are the most pressing challenges in NATO's southern flank, and what do you think about Spain's role in helping to address those for the alliance and with the alliance?
So thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you to the German Marshall Fund for this invitation to talk about the role of NATO in the south, especially when we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Mediterranean dialogue, and the 20th anniversary of the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative. So the Middle East and North Africa, the Sahel, and the broader African continent have strategic importance for peace and prosperity in the Euro-Atlantic region. Likewise, our alliance can do a lot to reinforce security and stability in our southern neighborhood. Spain is one of the allies that is closest to the south, not only geographically, but also in the intensity of our political, economic and human links to the region. We have always understood that our well-being depends on that of our southern neighborhoods. Today, after 2 years of preparatory work, we have adopted, and this is good news, an action plan to strengthen our approach to the south. This is, as I said, excellent news. For the first time, the Alliance will have a comprehensive, detailed and practical roadmap to work with our southern partners. So let me first highlight why instability in the southern neighborhood is a threat to NATO allies. To start, our adversaries do not hesitate to use instability in NATO's eastern and southern neighborhood against us. They work with non-state actors to amplify terrorism, maritime insecurity, or the consequences of climate change. Their goal is to weaken Euro-Atlantic security by creating a crescent of instability around us. In the process, they harm human and state security in our neighboring countries, who are the first direct victims of these destabilizing tactics. Dozens of women, men, and children are killed in raids of Russian mercenaries in Sahel villages, and thousands more are forcibly displaced trying to escape. Furthermore, Russia is developing links between stability in the east and the south through human trafficking organizations, terrorist networks, or coordinate disinformation campaigns against NATO in many African and Middle East countries. Thousands of people drown in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean after falling in the hands of human trafficking networks. Irregular border crossing originating in Africa into Poland are increasing dramatically. Who is helping these criminal networks and why? The human cost of these hybrid tactics is dramatic. NATO, I believe, must therefore have a comprehensive strategy to promote stability and good governance in the south. To work with our partners for strong security and defense institutions on capacity building with practical cooperation measures, and doing all of this based on mutual respect. This is where our new action plan comes in. First, through this action plan, we will invest in more political dialogue and more hands-on cooperation. NATO's political dialogue with our southern partners must reflect this spirit of friendship, mutual respect and mutual benefit. NATO has to be more present in the south. We already have a regional center in Kuwait, and we hope to have a liaison office in Amman soon. Second, we will work more with international organizations. The African Union, where we have a liaison office, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the Arab League, or are very important interlocutors and partners for NATO. With our support, they can be effective in areas that are essential for regional security. For example, initiatives to curb the spread of light and small weapons are crucial to end the insecurity that plagues the daily lives of millions of peoples in the south. NATO should particularly coordinate its actions with the European Union. I think this is very important. This is instrumental, especially now that both organizations have adopted comprehensive approaches with their southern neighborhood. And third, NATO is ready to work with its southern partners on critical issues such as terrorism, climate change, maritime security, or resilience. So let me finish, Stefan, by highlighting that the endorsement of this action plan is a big step for NATO. It's a real big step for NATO. And we particularly welcome the appointment of a special representative for the South. But this is not the end of the roadmap. Implementation in years to come will be key. In this difficult endeavor, you will always find the staunch commitment and support of my country. Spain is already working on many of these fields with our southern partners, and we are ready to scale up our efforts in the context of NATO cooperation. So thank you very much for your attention, and happy to exchange some views on this with you.
Great. Well, thank you, Prime Minister, and congratulations on the action plan. I know Spain provided the leadership and the heft to get that through the alliance, and you know, in another year, it might have been seen as one of the centerpieces of the summit. But for what's happening in the East, what's happened since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the full-scale war in 2022. But in the shadow of all that concerns us to the East, there's also a war happening in the South, as we all know. The war between Israel and Hamas, despite efforts to broker a ceasefire, continues. And I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on where this conflict is headed, and what are the implications for NATO's South? You ticked off some of the challenges that the southern flank of NATO face, the refugee flows and so on, terrorism. You know, where do you see this going, and what are the implications for NATO?
Well, I believe that the implications are, you know, very difficult for all of us, for NATO, and of course for all the countries in the region, in the Mediterranean, and of course the Middle East. But I think this is a global challenge for all countries. As you know, Spain and other countries in Europe, we took that step to recognize the state of Palestine because we believe that we need to give a political horizon to the people in the region, especially in Palestine, a political horizon to create the conditions for a new state that could coexist in peaceful and with security with their neighbors, especially with Israel. So I would like to acknowledge the efforts that President Biden has been taking since the beginning of the war regarding different aspects. The first one is the release of the hostages. The second is in the beginning to support Israel in its fight against Hamas. We of course condemned the terrorist attacks to Israel perpetrated by Hamas. But on the other hand, we understand that we need to create the conditions for an immediate and urgent ceasefire. Why? Because first of all, we need to avoid any risk of escalation, and there's a real risk of escalation to Lebanon. Second, because we need to stop this terrible humanitarian crisis that the Palestinians are suffering, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And last but not least, because it will be important to convene a peace conference, an international peace conference, to create the conditions for what I said in the beginning of my speech, the two-state solution, and to create that political horizon for the people in Palestine. So I think that we need, of course, that political effort. We need also to understand that UN resolutions from the Security Council are binding, and that last UN resolution led by the US administration stated crystal clear that we need a permanent ceasefire in order to stop this terrible war and focus on the humanitarian catastrophe that we are witnessing through the international media. So, of course, I think that this is going to be one of the challenges of the southern flank that we need to face and address from our NATO organization. And we will do our utmost to create those conditions and not to be again prisoners, I would say, of a new cycle of violence in the Middle East in the years to come. I think that this is enough. There's a lot of suffering on the ground, and we need to create those political conditions to avoid any risk of escalation and, of course, a new cycle of violence in the future.
Well, I hate to jump from one gloomy environment to another, but there's another part of Europe as well that's suffering terrible violence and bloodshed right now. The brutal war that Russia is waging against Ukraine as Ukraine fights for its own independence. One of the things that we've talked about here during the course of the day with other leaders is the bridge to NATO membership that the summit is agreeing to today. I was wondering if you could kind of give us your take, the view from Spain, which is a long way away from Ukraine. What is your take on the bridge to NATO membership for Ukraine, and what do you see as the opportunities and challenges along the way?
So we actually have, Stefan, in Spain more than 200,000 refugees coming from Ukraine, even though, of course, we have this long distance. And I can tell you by that large number, the majority of the Spaniards, they support our efforts regarding Ukraine, and because we understand what is at stake. It's not only the defense of the territorial integrity, the freedom, the right to exist of a nation, but also the respect of a world ruled by clear, let's say, principles, and this is also what we are defending: democracy, freedom, and the right to exist of a country such as Ukraine. So, you know, I think that it is indeed very important for our citizens to understand that what we are defending in Gaza and in Ukraine are not only the international law, but we have a consistent position, a consistent political positions, that we don't have double standards. So if we are telling our people that we are supporting Ukraine because we are defending the international law, this is the same to what we have to do towards Gaza and the war that we are now witnessing in the Middle East, saying that we are backing the international law, especially the international humanitarian law. So this is, at least from our perspective, what we defend as a country. And I would also add that, coming back to Ukraine, perhaps we don't have the conditions yet on the process for the integration of Ukraine in NATO, but in the statement, the declaration that we already endorsed, we say that that path is irreversible, and this is something that is going to happen. In the meantime, what we need to do is to support and back Ukraine as all member states from the NATO. From NATO, we are doing. And last but not least, I would say that it is important, this double path, not only NATO enlargement, but also the European Union enlargement. And second semester of last year, we had the privilege to chair the European Council, and we were leading, along with the Commission, the process for the enlargement of the European Union towards Ukraine. So I think this is also very important, because at the end of the day, NATO and the European Union, we have a strategic partnership that could create those synergies, not only on the defense and security dimension, but also the political one. And this is something that I think is recognized, and people in Ukraine are grateful for that.
Well, Prime Minister, I know you have a busy day, and I wish you the very best in the summit proceedings. On behalf of the entire forum, let us join in thanking Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez for his time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Sánchez, for that insightful perspective on NATO strategy and partnerships in the South. It is now my pleasure to soon welcome to the stage Matthew Koenig, Vice President and Senior Director for the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security at the Atlantic Council, for our next panel on Nordic security redrawn. Please join me in just a moment in welcoming Matthew to the stage. All right, let's welcome Matthew to the stage.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you to this discussion on Nordic security redrawn. As you've just heard, my name is Matthew Koenig. I'm Vice President and Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. As we all know, NATO has 2 new members, Finland and Sweden, bringing the NATO alliance to 32 countries. It also means that now every Arctic country except for Russia is a member of NATO. So to dive into some of the